Kalyn Kahler here, senior writer for ESPN. What's going on, pal?
Hey, Kevin, how are you? Cool to be colleagues now, by the way.
I'm fired up for it. This is the first thing we've done together.
Yeah.
We haven't been on a show together or anything like that. That's why I had you on. You wrote a fire piece, a crackerjack piece last week about the Dallas Cowboys that runs alongside something I've been saying for a long time, which is they don't operate like normal franchises do. And what I mean by that is, and this is, you could say a million different data points here, but like the owner's giving a press conference for the coach. The owner's giving a radio hit sometimes before the coach. He front runs you and says this and this. He will make news when and I don't know if you've ever been privy to this or seen it or been around it, where it's like in a lot of places it's like GM, coach, top PR guy will meet in a conference room somewhere and say like, all right, here's how we're going to address this. Here's what we're going to say about Anthony Richardson. Here's what we're going to say. Whatever the crisis of the day is, there's an on-message thing. It's like politics, right? The Cowboys are just like, Jerry Jones just going to shoot from the hip or whatever. And like the story I always have is like, I was in Oxnard 4 years ago. And so it was after Dak's breakout season. And so maybe it was longer than that. It was 2017. And I don't understand the passage of time. And so I was just sort of walking in the halls or the tennis courts out there, and Stephen Jones was just giving kind of a gaggle. And he was like, Connor Cook was higher on our board than Dak Prescott because Connor played in a pro-style offense. So remember, Dak had his breakout season.
Right.
And I was like, I think I said to Calvin Watkins or somebody kind of in the back, I was like, is this off the record? And they're like, no.
They're like, no, this is fully
And I'm like,
on.
so Stephen Jones, 5 feet away from me, just telling me what was going on with the draft board this time last year. And he's like, yeah, that's correct. That is correct. And like no other place operates like that. And listen, I'm not as a media member, I don't hate it. And like,
right. Keep going.
I was on Get Up the week that Malik Hooker ranked the guys in order of how quickly they should be paid, right?
Yeah.
And I literally was just like, God bless Malik Hooker. God bless Jerry Jones. God bless Malik Hooker. And I've said it, Kalyn, before, and like it's just different. So there's people just walking around the facilities, I'm going to put this to you in a second. But there's also just like media wise, I remember, so there's 30, I'd say 30 teams that operate their facility like a CIA black site, right? Like just like you can stand right here. You can't do anything back there.
You need
like
an
if
escort.
you go back there, you're going to be banned for the rest of your life. You'll never even get to attend the game. Facial recognition will get you just out of it, right? And so I was doing this story about I think it was like DeMarco Murray. Oh no, I know it was. It was they installed ballet bars in the locker room because they wanted to stretch like ballerinas. And so I went up to one of the PR guys and I was like, "Hey, can I talk to your trainer?" Which is a no in 30 locker rooms. Okay, like the Bengals back then were actually really good at this as well. So it's two teams, and the PR guy, we all know his name, he's no longer there. Just goes, I think he's probably just in the training room if you want to go back there. And I was like,
you're like, what?
I beg your pardon. And he's like, yeah, it's right back there. Just walk in. And so I walk in into the deep, dark tunnels of the facility, just looking for the trainer. And I walk in and there's 5 Cowboys getting treatment. And I was like, hey, is the trainer here?
Do you know where he is?
Do you know where can you point me to the trainer? And I was just
insane.
like, okay. And so that it's not, I don't know if it's like that anymore,
right.
But that's where it's there's just, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm saying it is, they treat everything differently there. As I said, Cincinnati, when I came in the league, was the only other team like that. It's no longer really like that. Cincinnati, it was more like, oh, hey, locker room's closed, why don't you just walk in there kind of thing. There's the only 2 teams like that. But even the Cowboys were far beyond that. So you wrote a piece last week, and if anybody hasn't read it, it says the crux of it is what, Kalyn?
So the Cowboys are the only team in the NFL to offer public access to the facility, which, as you mentioned, is a very private place for the majority of NFL clubs. And the public access of the facilities, they've got daily tours that are happening multiple times a day. On Saturdays before home games, it's every 20 minutes. And I did 3 tours while I was there because I was like, I have to I did 3 back to back to back, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I picked a home game weekend because I knew that is when they're most popular, because fans are obviously traveling in to the game. So I took 3 tours and got to see everything you can see. And the reason why I wrote about this and found out about it is because Dalton Schultz told Pat McAfee about it last spring. And that quote kind of went viral. I'm sure that you talked about it on your podcast because you are actually, when I wrote this story, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to tell Kevin about this because he's going to flip, because this is your whole thing is they're not serious about football. They're not a serious football team.
If they wanted to change, they would have changed a long time ago.
Exactly. So originally I heard Dalton say that last spring and I was like, okay, you know what? That's really interesting, but I thought it might be a bigger story. So I actually approached it being like, what's wrong with the Cowboys? Why can't they win the playoffs? Why for the last 3 years straight have they had the most embarrassing in all different ways too? All different ways have they exited the playoffs early, but each time in a different embarrassing fashion. And so I was like, why is it that they're so successful in the regular season and then they cannot put it together in the playoffs? And so I kind of thought about what Dalton said, and I was like, you know what, maybe that'll be part of the story, but I don't think the tours could be the whole story. That seems kind of trivial, right? Wrong, because then once I started talking to players, my first phone call was to Jaron Kearse, who was a safety on the last 3 years of Cowboys teams. He's now a free agent. So I was like, hey, he's got nothing going on. Let me give him a call. So I called him probably in July, and I just went very broad first. I was like, hey, why couldn't you guys get it together in the playoffs? What is wrong with those Cowboys teams that you were on? And he was really, no one can answer the question is what I'll say first. That question, nobody has a clear answer to of oh, this thing is why, or it was our run game. Sure. That was part of it. It was our secondary. Okay. But he kind of took it really big and was it's different playing there than anywhere else. He played in Detroit. He played in Minnesota. And he was like, it's just different. There's a lot of distractions that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And then he independently listed the tours, and then he starts talking about the tours. And I'm like, okay, so maybe this is not as trivial as I thought it was. Maybe this is big enough. Maybe the tours are a big enough thing to do an entire story on. And I think my story was 4,000 words. So it could have been, I think I filed it at 5,000. It was incredibly long. So this small little thing that happens there that might seem okay, who cares? That can't be the reason why they're not winning. It is actually a very important thing. And then when I talked to Jerry Jones, he made it so much more important, because he was like, oh, actually, this is how I do my business. This is a prime example of the way I run this team. And I've always prioritized. He told me involving fans is in every corner of the building is the way he views his legacy as an owner, essentially. He's coming up, he's 82 now. He's coming up on the, reflective years of your life, I would say, and the reflective period of what have you contributed to the NFL as an owner? And he's contributed a lot. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yep. But when I was just shocked when I sat down with him for 20 minutes. First of all, I was kind of surprised. I don't know why I was surprised he talked to me, because
talk to anybody.
He'll talk to anyone.
He will talk to anybody. He will talk to anybody.
I think I was expecting him to be why would someone write this much about this small thing? And this isn't that big of a deal. But instead he was no, thank you. Thank you for writing about this, because this is exactly what I want people to know about my team is we welcome our fans in. And he's like, I don't care if the players think it's a distraction, because this is how I run my team. And this is what's important to me. And then, because he literally said he'd never heard anyone complain about it. And if they were going to complain about it, he's like, it wouldn't matter, because they'd be swimming against the stream. And I did have a source tell me that their player leadership council, which is captains essentially, they've talked about the tours and how they don't like the tours and how they find them to be distracting and unnecessary, but they've never taken it outside of the leadership council, because they all know well, it's a lost cause. Nothing we say is going to change anything because we're not in charge here. And Jordan Lewis, who's on the team right now, I talked to him after their Lions loss, and I was like, what happened? Essentially, like, what's going on here? How can this happen to you guys? And because that was the week that I was there, is when they completely got just embarrassed in every fashion by the Detroit Lions at home. And when I talked to Jordan after the game, I just kind of big picture was like, how do you explain this? Like, what's going on here? And instead of like talking about, oh, well, we really got beat in this area of the game, instead of talking X's and O's, he was like, it's everything surrounding the Cowboys. He was like, it's how we're always talking about the Super Bowl when it's week 6. We can't be looking at the postseason during the regular season. And he seemed like really frustrated. And it wasn't like, how you can tell when people are like, the media is doing this to us and you guys are the ones. It wasn't that. It was very much like us, like internally, like coaches. And just that morning, Jerry had been on Fox, I think it was, for his birthday. It was his birthday that day. And he was talking about postseason expectations. So the tours ended up being this really great, like, little thing that actually is exactly the Cowboys. Like, you can take this one little thing, 30 fans going through the facility every 20 minutes on a Saturday, and that is literally the Dallas Cowboys experience.
So a couple things there. Number one is that I remember I heard a story years ago that this is like early 90s, that there was a pundit who used to just kill the Cowboys, to kill Jerry, and everybody knew that he would just go with Jerry every chance he got. And this is like, I'm sure, like 1993, 1994, I don't even know. And the guy, the pundit, ends up at a Jerry dinner, like sitting next to Jerry. And Jerry's like loving it.
Jerry,
and somebody
he's his
was
best friend.
And somebody was like, Jerry, like, I don't want to be weird. Isn't this guy like your arch enemy in the media? And he goes, no, he just does nice stories about me. He does nice stories. And they're like, Jerry, nice stories? What do you mean? He goes, he talks about me for 20 minutes on ESPN.
Right.
And like, that's a nice story to him. Doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
It's that you're talking about Jerry Jones.
Right.
And that to me is it. And like, that's the Dominique Foxworth line. They're programming a reality show. That's it. He wants to be, if he saw this show, would be like, hell yeah. Right. Hell yeah. Because otherwise they'd be talking about the Detroit Lions and how good of a roster they built. The other thing I'll say is that you mentioned, like, why can't they reach it? It's because there are hundreds of thousands of things that go into winning one single football game. Little blocks, whatever, type of cleats you wear, all that stuff. Times it by 53, multiply it by the amount of plays you have. You have hundreds of thousands of variables. The Cowboys have one thing, which is roster talent through the draft. They have almost no advantages in any other thing. And that ends with 11 wins. That the ceiling there is 11 wins. So then it's almost like a college team, right? Mm-hmm. Like I used to say, the biggest gulf in college football is between teams that can make the playoff and win the national championship. It's like when Notre Dame used to be a 4 seed and everybody like, here come the Irish. And it's like, oh, no, sorry, they lost by 60 because the gap is so huge. And that to me is what the Cowboys max out at. If you don't have all those little advantages, roster talent through the draft, not free agency, not through trades, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And I will say Mike Silver reported this. It was just like a little tiny detail yesterday where he was like, Brandon Aubrey, obviously we know he had jury duty, might still be on jury duty. I'm not sure if that ended or not, but he had jury duty last
felony
week.
Case.
Yeah. Brandon Aubrey's like probably the only player there that's doing his job well and at a super high level this season. And so he had jury duty, and Mike Silver reported that, he was coming in at night to kick and getting in his work still when he was missing official practice periods. And he reported that on Thursday night, they had a high school football game in the indoor, because the indoor facility is the Ford Center, which is the Star, which I actually think is kind of cool that they have like high school football games there. Like, I think that's kind of
boxing matches there as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like fun. It's like, okay, multi-purpose, whatever. But that meant that Brandon had to go to their outdoor fields, and they don't have lights on the outdoor fields because like they don't practice at night typically. There's lights that will shine on from like the office buildings, but there's no, and the sprinklers were on. And I actually last week was talking to someone in the building who had told me the same thing, but they had told me about Wednesday night. So also on Wednesday night, when he went back from jury duty, there was another event. I don't think it was a football game. I'm not sure what it was. Something else was going on in the indoor. So your star kicker, you're probably leading point scorer at this point in the season. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm sure he is. He's out there in the dark getting his kicks in because you've booked something else in the indoor facility, because again, that's part of your business plan, is to use your practice facility as a public space to get the brand out there, to let people have prom in your cafeteria. That's literally on the team website. Like if you go, you can like look at all the places and rooms in this thing that you can rent, and they advertise having prom in the training table, which is their cafeteria, which is just incredible to me. And obviously prom season, like players probably aren't going to be there. I don't think.
Prom. Yeah.
May, is that April or May? May, you might be running into some conflicts.
You might have rookie mini camps.
Yeah. Anyway, so like, it's just funny. It's just like, it doesn't seem real. And like one moment that I'll share from the tour that just was also kind of dystopian to me is like, I don't know if dystopian is the right word, but
I mean, just use it.
Just like what this is a Saturday at 1:20 p.m. tour. And there's probably 30 people in my group because again, it's getting crowded now. Tours are going off every 20 minutes. We go through the training table, their cafeteria. Micah Parsons is in there with his 2 kids, like probably a lot of other, I don't know who everybody was, but like an entourage, a family, a group. He's obviously missed at that point, I think it was the 2 previous games for Dallas, and was dealing with a high ankle sprain. Most teams, again, would keep all of the details of that very private. They would not want you to know if he's going to play or not. They're not going to, they're going to put it on the injury report because they have to, but they don't want to. And here's Micah Parsons, and he hobbles past our group, like very clearly limping badly. Not like lightly, like bad limp. And I look around to the people in my group and they're all like, did you see his limp? It's going to be several more weeks. They're all speculating about his injury because they saw it from 5 feet away. And that blew my mind because I'm like, I mean, hypothetically, San Francisco 49ers, their next opponent at that point, after the Lions. Like, if they were to send a scout, they would be heavily punished. There would be big consequences from the NFL
That's correct.
for doing that. But I mean, what if somebody knows somebody who works for the Niners and they just shoot off a little text and they're like, hey, Micah, it's not looking good. I don't know. I mean, I'm just like, it's just crazy. And if you ask Jerry about the competitive advantage aspect, he also doesn't care about that. He's like, that's, it's people make too much about that. And I sometimes agree with him a little bit on that. I think the paranoia in the NFL has reached, ridiculous levels. But again, like if you really want to win, you do need to take these things seriously.
Wow. I have one big question for you.
So, yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to say one thing. You mentioned the Texans 49ers thing. I actually had one GM. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened more, but it's only happened once. That maybe a few years ago, maybe longer, I don't know. GM is no longer employed as a GM.
Okay.
I was on my tour and he was like, I'd done a couple of teams in division and he was like, hey, what are those teams working on? What are those teams working on? Like what scheme stuff? And I was like, Bubba, you got the wrong guy. I am not smart enough. I can tell you what's going on from watching a play.
Sure.
First of all, I wouldn't do it from journalism ethics, not in a million years. And I've never been rarely put in that position. When I am, I know about it immediately. I want to say that first. But the second part of it is that I am not nearly smart. In fact, any information I give you, sir, will actively harm you because I don't actually know scheme at that level.
Right.
And like, I don't think any traveling national reporter would, frankly, to be like, oh, hey, whatever. Right. And then like anything. And now it's like anything. It's like, oh, they're using so and so at HVAC. Like that would be it.
Right.
But
right.
even that now just leaks on social media. So I'm like,
Right.
what are you looking for, pal? What are you looking for? Because I got nothing for you. And if you need me, you've already lost. All right. Do the Cowboys want to change?
What'd you say?
Do
they
the
want to change?
Cowboys want to change
As a team?
Does Jerry Jones want to change
No.
anything about the way he operates?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't get that sense at all. And I don't even think that, he went into the season knowing, my perspective, I think you share the same thing, and knowing you're going to make a coaching change at the end of the year. Yeah. He said he's all in. And I think fans, if you listen, when I was in Dallas, I was obviously driving around listening to only sports radio, because I was like, I got to get a sense of what the people here are thinking. And the number of people who throw that quote of being all in back in his face is so high. It's like every caller is like, he's not all in. But then when he made that comment last year at the Senior Bowl. And then when he was asked to expand on what being all in means, he didn't even say to win a Super Bowl. Yeah. He actually didn't say that. So I think he's known this season is not going to be it, and they're just going to hire a new coach. But here's the thing that actually I think is an interesting question to ask you is and you've probably brought this up on the show too, but after I was in there and I saw all the things going on, and, literally I'm 3 feet away from a receivers coach, Robert Prince, who I don't know, but feel like I know now because he was staring right at me as he's doing hang cleans in the weight room. After I'm seeing that, I'm in what world is Bill Belichick coaching here? In what universe? In what universe? And in what universe,
well, that was,
in what universe is Jerry Jones changing to make Bill Belichick comfortable coaching there? There's no, it's not even worth talking about. I don't see how it could ever happen.
That was the one thing with the Sean Payton rumors for years, is everybody was like, so Sean Payton gets his run of the place in New Orleans. Tom Benson before Gail Benson, not a lot of ownership involvement, gives him the resources and says, good luck, everybody. And you're telling me that Sean Payton, this is what other people in the league would say who know Payton and Jerry a lot better than I do, say, you're telling me Sean Payton wants to do film sessions with the owner on Monday?
Right.
Yeah, he'll get right on that.
Right. Pal. And so I think that's my biggest question for the Cowboys is I don't think they want to change, but it's also when you go to coach there, you know what you're getting into. But it also makes me wonder, are they ever going to get, I don't know. Would you describe Mike McCarthy as being desperate for a job when he went there?
No. But that was the best roster he was going to get.
Yeah. So it's Jerry's going to be able to hire a good coach, but it's is he ever going to be able to hire the best coach? Because
he needs somebody extremely confident and extremely a coach with Hollywood instincts. What I mean by that is Jimmy Johnson loved the spotlight. Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, loved the spotlight. True. And I wonder if you get someone with a healthy ego like that who says, you know what, this is my house too. And I think Sean Payton is probably a bridge too far in that regard. It's just as far as what I just said.
Right.
But I also think that someone like that would be great. Where it's someone who wants to coexist with Jerry, but is strong enough to say, you know what, I'm also the star here. And I don't think there's been enough of that. And I don't remember who it was, but they said Jason Garrett's best trait was managing Jerry. But he didn't have the second gear of also a level of confidence needed to the reason we talk about Jerry Jones is because he's by far the most compelling person in that building at all times.
Right.
And I kind of think if there was a coach who had magnetism, like a Jimmy Johnson, whoever that might be in this generation, I think you'd see things change just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words. Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire.
You wrote about the backup quarterback crisis, let's say, at the beginning of this season, so last month. And I think we've seen a lot of that. And this is something I've been talking about for a long time. And this is part of this is a backup player crisis because of how young the league has gotten, and teams' rookie wage cap makes it so if you're going to have any expensive veteran, they're going to be limited. And it's a year-to-year thing, right? Gone are the days of Doug Peterson just getting 15 years out of being a random backup.
Right.
That's just not going to happen anymore. And because they're just too expensive, and you can just get a sixth round guy, and all of a sudden it's like Sean Clifford or whomever, and then replace him with Malik Willis, and it's like that's cheap stuff. Or who was the kid from Michael Pratt, right? Like you can have those guys compete for your backup quarterback position, and what you're not going to do is in most cases spend $5 million to bring in whoever this generation's Doug Peterson is, or whatever. It's just a little bit different. So I'll start with you. What is and why is it happening? The backup quarterback crisis in the NFL.
There's a bunch of factors here. One of the ones I wrote about was that we've seen the league change the emergency quarterback rule a few times in the last few years, because that Niners NFC Championship game a couple of years ago, where they didn't have a quarterback after Josh Johnson has to leave the game with a concussion, and Brock Purdy had to re-enter, but he had an elbow injury and couldn't throw a pass. It was just awful. That inspired owners to vote to bring back the emergency third quarterback. But the problem still is that teams are not keeping three quarterbacks. Majority of teams are not keeping three quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. So when you have your third quarterback on your practice squad, that is just kind of a more transient existence for that guy. And, is that guy really going to develop into, a starting quarterback? Probably not. But are they going to develop into a reliable backup? They might. But now in today's NFL, it's just really difficult. Teams have to really prioritize that third quarterback spot to give it a roster spot. And you're really only seeing it happen when a team knows that some other, you're only going to put him on your roster if you know that another team is trying to get him. You want to protect him because you're exposing him to other teams if he's on your practice squad. So, you'll see like Trey Lance, he's on the 53-man roster in Dallas because I think Dallas views him as a valuable asset still. And, I don't know if he is or not.
Yeah.
Well,
he'll get right on being valuable.
Right. So
he'll get right around to that.
So the development has suffered. And if you talk to any veteran quarterback, like I had a conversation about this with Joe Flacco, our new Colts starting quarterback.
New Colts starter.
Conversation with Joe about this was really interesting because I kind of was like, has the lack of development of young quarterbacks actually helped you? And he was like, he was like, yeah, it has, because he's on his couch last year. He's waiting for the opportunity, and it's easier for a team to go, oh, Joe Flacco's there. He's got a lot of experience. Let's sign him instead of taking a chance on one of our younger guys, giving him experience, because it's just easier. Every team is in win now mode, maybe more so than 10, 20 years ago. There's less patience from ownership. So you're like, we're going to go to this established veteran who was a starter and now is kind of old. That's easier now to do that than it is to do actually what the Packers did, which I actually think is awesome what the Packers did. Like the Packers did something we don't see a lot. We should probably see more of is, trading for a young quarterback who didn't get a fair shot to even see what he was with his original team in Tennessee. And when they made that trade, sorry, I'm like going like a bunch of directions here, but like they're all kind of.
That's what this show is.
Yeah. I didn't even finish
just
my Joe Flacco
just
point.
Keep going.
And now I'm on the Packers.
It's done. You've burned your Flacco
we've moved
point.
on. So
burn the boats on Flacco.
So the Packers, when they traded for Malik Willis, I was like, I don't know about that because it seemed kind of random and it seemed. I wasn't sure, I haven't had a lot of conversations with people about Malik Willis, but I was like, does anyone think he's good and has potential? But I think I underestimated. And also he didn't have experience in like a Shanahan style offense that Matt LaFleur is running. So I was like, that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. And I thought after Jordan Love got hurt, because that happened after they traded for Malik Willis, they got Malik Willis, then Jordan got hurt, and then Willis had to play. I thought maybe they should even make a move for maybe like Nick Mullins or, somebody of that realm who has played in San Francisco and like could just go seamlessly into the offense. And they didn't. And so it really actually surprised me, how well Malik Willis played in relief of Jordan Love. And even on Sunday, like that that surprised me. And I think I underestimated the coaching. So that's a really great example of a team being like, okay, we've got to make a move, but we're actually going to go for someone who we think we can develop still into a player. Kind of the reverse Flacco is what the Packers did. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I have humbled myself on one thing, and I saw it this week. So when Josh Rosen was cut loose, or was going to be cut loose by Arizona, my thought was, you know what? Top 10 talent. There should be 31 teams knocking down the door for old Josh Rosen. And I've seen that tape with Anthony Richardson. Oh, 31 teams. You better call. You better call. And the problem with it is that you're not going to be invested in the player when you get him, because you're going to get him for a fifth-round pick. I'm not saying Anthony Richardson should be a fifth-round pick, but like we saw this with Dwayne Haskins a little bit as well. Like guys who just get immediately after 2 years traded, right?
Right.
You're not going to be that invested in it. You have your starter or some other plan. He's not going to change your trajectory, right? You're not going to give him any practice reps. He's not going to get any better. You don't have a super coach, and we're going to move on. Like, the only way for these guys to thrive is if they're given unlimited chances and unlimited coaching. And that's easier said than done. And my feeling on, I was thinking about this yesterday, trying to think of the number of guys on a 53-man roster whose livelihood is at stake on a month-to-month basis, not year-to-year. I think it's like 30.
Yeah.
Maybe it's less, but it's at least like 25. Like 25 guys on a 53-man roster for the average team are 1 month away from never playing in the NFL again. And I don't mean injury. I mean like they get burned, they look terrible, they don't generate any pass rush, they get run on, secrets out on them as far as, they have bad eyes and can't stop misdirection plays, whatever. You're a month away, I think, from never playing again. Obviously, that's like an old coaching line. You're 30 days from bankruptcy and coaching. You're fighting for your life on a month-to-month basis. I think there's probably 10 more on a year-to-year basis. And then there's the, 4 to 5 guys who have real money guaranteed year over year over year. Again, on some teams, especially like the Eagles, it's going to be way more guys not fighting year to year because they have so much guaranteed money coming to them. It depends on how much talent's on the roster. Maybe my numbers are way off. But that, to me, is the hardest thing for the Anthony Richardson thing, because, and the Panthers thing. The Panthers probably have like 48 guys fighting month to month, right?
Yes.
No shots at the Panthers.
Yes.
But like it's kind of last chance saloon. If you get cut by the Panthers, where can you play, right? And so I think it's really hard to stand up and say, hey guys, we're going to give a quarterback unlimited time to figure it out because there's a huge payoff. And in the interim, everybody else's job prospects are going to take a hit. Everybody else's. And nobody's tape. The defense is one thing, but like even that, you're on the field more. You're playing more possessions because that you're playing a different type of ball because your offense isn't gonna be as good. Like everything gets a little bit worse, and that to me is the biggest thing. And I think it's fine for someone to say this is a colossal mistake, but like we're in a human business, and one of the things I like about football in relation, my wife last night asked me what a bullpen game was because we're watching this, and I was like. And then I had to explain analytics and Moneyball. And like the whole time I just felt like a sense of dread and doom. I'm just like, I don't like explaining this. I don't like explaining on base percentage. And there's something still so human about football, and that will always be the case. And I think facing the locker room is one of those things. And I think that you can do lanyards and charts in other sports that you cannot do in football. And that to me is why Anthony Richardson's in such a tough spot, is that he needs more time to play, and the Colts are a little too good
around him
to give him that chance and say, we're going to punt on the season. They're 4-4. Like we're going to punt on the season to give Anthony Richardson more time. I think it's a mismatch of situation and quarterback.
Mm-hmm. And in that division too, it's like, it's not, I mean, the Texans are good, but now they're down their two receivers. Like their injuries, their offensive line isn't good. There's definitely like a path for the Colts to either win the division or even get into the playoffs. So I totally understand that. And I will say the Colts, I mean, last year, they've done the veteran backup thing, and it's worked for them because last year they had Gardner Minshew and they got within a game of the playoffs. within a game of making the playoffs last season, had a pretty successful year considering that Anthony Richardson goes down in week 2 and you're playing Gardner Minshew for the rest of the year. And I think, I've talked to their quarterback coach there, Cam Turner, for the story that we're referencing, just about their strategy. And, he's like, I would keep 5 quarterbacks. They had like 5 quarterbacks in training camp, which was crazy. But it's like, why not? Like, sure, you're sacrificing other positions, but you've got 90, like, you know what I mean? So they had 5 camp arms, right? Like they had 2 guys that were like clear camp arms, but that's kind of that team does make an investment in this position. It's a little bit different than I see from other teams. And Sam Ehlinger, their QB3, has been on the roster like his whole time there, which is super rare for that third quarterback. Like they've never put him on the practice squad. I think he went on IR once and that's it. Like he's been on the roster and had to start games. I think he started 2 games since he's been there, when they had Matt Ryan and Nick Foles as the QB 1 and 2. And they still were like, no, we're going to keep this rookie 6th-round pick on the roster still. So that team under Chris Ballard for the last few years has definitely treated that position with a little bit more investment than others have. So I'm kind of, willing to give them like the benefit of the doubt here of like, this is going to be the best move of benching Anthony Richardson at this point and going to Joe Flacco when you think he gives you the best chance to win. And like, maybe for Anthony's confidence, like this is it. Obviously it sucks to get benched, but maybe in the long run, he's kind of broken as a passer right now. So maybe this is the best choice for him to figure it out and learn from behind Joe.
A couple things. Number one, and this is actually the only thing I'll say about this, and I want to move on to the Lions hangover stuff. But the only time the criticism really digs at me is when someone's right. And I have long said that a team should draft a quarterback every single draft.
Yes.
Every single draft. Should draft a quarterback, see what they have, make them quarterback 3, develop them. So I say that probably every year on a podcast for 5 years at the Ringer. I don't know. And then I kill the Michael Penix pick. Somebody correctly emails me.
You're like, isn't this what you've been saying?
Yes. And I was like, damn, they're kind of right. And like, you can't, and it's funny because I said this about the Jordan Love pick because I loved the Jordan Love pick at the time.
Yeah.
I said, you can't, everybody can't say we love best player available and then get mad when it happens.
Right.
And I've seen it both ways. And I still don't love the Penix pick, but after that email, I was like, God darn it. Like that guy's right. This random emailer is one of the best, smartest emailers I've ever gotten.
It's a fair point, but like it bothered me when the Falcons were like, I can't remember who at the Falcons said this, either the head coach or GM, not sure which one, but one of them was quoted being like, we're doing what Green Bay did. We're doing the Green Bay model. Yeah. But like, it wasn't like it is, but it's not, because the 8th overall pick is so much different in value than what was Jordan Love 23, 26 something. It's so different. And the money that you gave Kirk Cousins versus that you just gave Kirk Cousins versus, and Aaron Rodgers sort of at the end of that, coming up on the end of his deal. It's just a different scenario. But overall, I am coming around to the Penix pick as well, because I do think like, especially, one of the reasons that I wrote about the backup quarterback crisis is because last year, in the last 3 seasons, there have been more quarterbacks that have had to start games per season in the last 3 years than like ever before in the NFL. And yes, that correlates with, okay, there's an extra game, but it was like statistically even higher. Like that percentage was higher than you would think it would be with one more game. So that's why I decided to write about it, because I was like, okay, for whatever reason, we're seeing more starting quarterbacks get hurt every year, and teams are going to have to confront this reality more, because I think there's still, when I talk to quarterback agents, like they say that there's still a really common, viewpoint from general managers where it's like, if your starter goes down, the season's over. Like there's still plenty of general managers who think that way, but I think they're going to have to stop soon, because I think it's like, you've got to problem solve in season. Like there are ways to win and still be competitive.
Yeah, I completely understand. All right, you were doing some notes on the Lions hangover.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you found. I don't know. You were in the lab all morning, and
I was in the lab.
You have the floor.
So, okay. So, I mean, have you seen people talking about the Lions hangover effect?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Chris Long started it.
Sure. Chris Long started it. And I believe he was looking even at last season. And I have not gone back to last season yet. I probably will when I spend more time on this, but I just started this yesterday because I was like, I think it'd be interesting to look at this effect and see if it's real. So Chris Long started this and he said, he started noticing every team the Lions play lose their next game. Yeah. And I was like, oh, interesting. And the fans have like latched onto this. They're calling it the Honolulu flu. Very catchy. Love it. Super cute. So I was like, let's see if it's real. Is there a way to prove that it's real? And I'm still not sure that there really is any definitive, numbers can say whatever you want them to, obviously. Sure. So, but what I have found, so right now I'm just looking at this season for 2024. I'm throwing out the Cowboys, okay? Mm-hmm. Because the Cowboys had a bye week after they played the Lions. And if we think about, okay.
think of all the tours they snuck in that bye week.
So many. Anyways, so I threw out the Cowboys because I was like, all right, they had a bye week. They got to rest. You think that when you think about why there might be a hangover effect, it's like the exertion that you spent from playing the Lions, a physical team. So when you look at the Lions, they've had five opponents who the next game lost against the spread. And I made sure to look at like against the spread because that shows you, okay, they're actually underperforming. They're not just losing, they're underperforming. So then I was like, all right, let me go to True Media and let's see if there's been any recent teams that have had a similar streak of 5 straight opponents losing against the spread. And hold on. What I found was last year, going back to Dallas again. Dallas, week 1 through week 8, 6 straight opponents lost their next game against the spread. Then if you look at their full season for the Cowboys, the opponents of the Cowboys went 4-12 against the spread. So it ended. It was not a full streak. It went back to kind of normal probability. Then San Francisco 2022, and also Dallas 2023, like good team. Okay. Good team. San Francisco 2022 or Dallas regular season team. Good team. San Francisco 2022. They had a streak of 7 straight opponent losses against the spread. So they were week 1 through week 8, 7-0 or 0-7. Their opponents went 0-7 against the spread. Yeah. So that is a longer streak than the current Lions. But that just kind of showed me this isn't that uncommon that last year a team did this and the year before a team did this. Yeah. Now, if the Lions do this all season, we may have something. But at this point in the season, I think it's a narrative-driven hypothesis, which is fun. And it's actually an interesting question to ask is like, I don't remember anyone talking about Cowboys opponents this way last year. I don't remember anyone even with the Niners in 2022. Also a good team, a team that went to the Super Bowl that year. Like, I don't remember. Do you remember? I don't remember any conversation about that. So it's
nor did those teams play in a way that suggested exhaustion or physical wear and tear the next week.
Right. And so I'm in my early research right now, I'm basically concluding that it's random, unfortunately. And that, because if you actually do, like I had a
research
Zoom,
rejected.
Yeah. I had a Zoom with Seth Walder, one of our analytics gurus yesterday.
One of our favorite guests here.
Yeah. He's great. And he was like I'm like literally so bad at math, you guys, but he was doing like just basic. He was like, okay, the probability that you lose against the spread, right? 50% chance. So he was like 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5, 5 times. Multiply that by 32. You get 1. So theoretically, at any given 5-game stretch, one team is going to have a streak similar to this. But Kevin, I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
To help me with my story.
Yeah.
If you were trying to like prove that this might be a real thing, what metrics are you looking at to be like, it's hard to play the Lions? Like what, I mean, how would you measure physical exertion?
I would probably look. So let's say essentially, I assume this is in the trenches, right?
You would think, right? Yeah.
And so my guess would be, is there an uptick in rushing yards before contact, for instance, the next week? Are defensive tackles like, I'm so tired and drained? Right. I would look at that. I would look at missed tackles.
Right.
It's a big one. Missed tackles would be a big one. Is there an uptick in missed tackles next week? Because I think that is physicality. And also like I know this sounds crazy, but like there's some things like there's this guy in Miami, not to talk about Miami too much, but like this guy in Miami named Demi Martinez who just runs over people. It's like the next Marshawn Lynch, right? And there was a play, the last touchdown he scored, it was clear to me that the Florida State DB Earl Little had an angle to try to tackle him, and then he just was like, he kind of intentionally took a bad angle because there were only two people on the field. Yeah. And he kind of just like got there and then like was like 2 yards away, and he could have dove, and then he kind of like pulled up and then just like took a little lap. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he started running the opposite direction as soon as Martinez scored, just so no one could realize that he actually was about 1.5 yards away at one point. Yeah. Like I don't know. You almost have to use like, I don't know how you would do this, like player tracking as far as like how close people get to people. And that is unquantifiable. And it's funny. I met with a company years ago, maybe like 4 years ago, that they were trying to use player tracking data to measure instincts, where it's like, this play is going in this direction. I think they did it. I think it's just proprietary now. I wrote about it. I don't remember their names. They came up to me at the combine a couple years ago.
Put up some coin.
And it was basically just like, if the play is going to do this, what players are reacting quickest to that, and how often are they right? And I almost wonder if there's a scenario where like you could do that for like, and again, this is all proprietary. You would not be able to do this with Seth Walter, even though we love Seth Walter. Like, just whether or not guys like just like are just slow coming off the line. You know, slow. Like, is the safety a step slow? Is there an explosion? You know, they do measure get off speed. They really do. Next gen stats, and so I wonder if it's like a get off explosions thing that would go. Again, I don't know anything. I have not looked at these numbers.
Get off speed is interesting.
What would be signify a tired defense? That's all.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us where we can read you, where we can do everything.
You can read me on ESPN.com. I'm on Twitter at Kalyn Kahler, at Twitter. And also I have a podcast narrative investigative series that just came out called Spiraled. If you like that, if that's your jam, it's about ex-NFL players who joined an extreme religious group. So you can find that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts as well.
All right. Well, that's it. That's Kalyn Kahler. I'm excited to read more of her work. I'm so glad we're talking. I'm so glad we worked together.
Yeah, that was fun.
I'll see you in Bristol at some point.
Yeah.
I probably won't see you in Bristol.
Probably not.
I never see anybody in Bristol.
I never go there. I went there once, but maybe I'll go again.
I go there every few weeks. It's fun.
Yeah.
There's a nice little cafeteria.
The cafeteria is nice.
The Caesar wrap is really good. It's more than enough for you. Although it's hard to get to. I'll say that. I'm lucky to be able to drive there in about 70 minutes. All right, Kalyn, thanks, pal.